Now I will start with the card look. And for that, in the components folder, I'll create a new subfolder which I will name UI, because I want to store some general UI components in there. And my card should be one of those general components. So in there, I'll add a basecard.view file following this view style guide recommendation. And in here, we now need a template, of course. Now, how should a card look like? What should a card component do? It's a very simple component. It will have no logic attached to it. It's just about being a wrapper to other content, which then has a certain look. And for that, in this template, I'll just add a div, opening and closing, and then provide a certain styling. So for that, I'm again adding my scoped styles, and attached you find the Basecard CSS file, which, as before, contains the styling, the CSS rules you want to add between your style tags here in the Basecard.view file. This will style the div in a certain way. But now one important thing is missing here. I mentioned that this card should be usable as a wrapper around any content we want. And Vue has a built-in feature that makes building such components easy. Slots. So here I will add a slot now between those divs so that we can feed in any markup, any HTML code of our choice, and it will be wrapped by this div with this style. That's the idea. Now we don't need to give this slot a name because it's the only slot here. And with that, we can now go to the learning resource where I want to use that card and replace this div here with that base card. And actually here I just noticed the div was placed incorrectly. The div should of course wrap all the content inside of the list item. So it wraps the header, the paragraph, and the nav here. That's all part of this base card. But wait a second, is Basecard available already? It's not, because we haven't registered it. Now, since we're using it here in the learning resource.view file, we could of course add it as a local component here. But this Basecard component will probably be used in other parts of the application as well. Therefore, adding it as a global component might make more sense. And in general, these base components will typically be global components because typically, being base components, they will be used multiple times in different parts of your app. So therefore, I'll go to main.js and I will import Basecard there from ./components/UI/basecard.view. And now store my created app here in a constant, so that on this app I can then also conveniently call component and register the Basecard HTML element name for this Basecard component we're importing here. And with that, if I save this, we now got this card look for our learning resources. And that already looks quite a bit better. Now let's work on the header. And for that, I'll add yet another subfolder, the layouts subfolder, which should hold my layout specific components. So basically the header and the footer if we would have one. Here I'll add the header, and since we'll only have one header in the entire application, I'll name it the header. Side note, I could have also named the stored resources the resources, because we're also only using that once. But here I think stored resources is the better name because it describes in greater detail what this component will be about. Header, on the other hand, would otherwise just be a single word, which is not recommended anyways. Keep in mind that your component should consist of 2 words, and therefore the header is a great name here. Long story short, that's my header. I'll add my template here, and in that template I of course want to have a header element, the built-in HTML header element. And in there I'll have a h1 element, and between those tags I want to output the title. And I could hard code the title here, but also for practice purposes, I'll make this a prop here. But you could also just hard code it here. That would be fine as well. So now I'll add my script here and make it clear that I want to get a title prop so that I can output it here. And this header should now be used in our app.view file above the stored resources. Hence here I want to import the header from components, layouts, the header.view, and I will register it here as a local component. And then here I can add the dash header like this, and now also set the title prop, and I'll name my demo application here Remember Me, because it's all about remembering learning resources, right? So that's the header component. Let's now also add some styling to the header.view file. And for that, you know it, we add our style tag here with the scoped attribute to make sure that the styling only affects this component. And as before, you find a file attached, in this case a header.css file, which contains the styles you should copy into those style tags here. And then, if we reload, we see this header above our stored resources. So this is slowly taking shape. As a next step, why don't we also turn the button into a separate component? A separate component which has some default styling. Again, try this on your own, come up with a solution on your own. We'll implement it together in the next lecture.